Have you ever replayed the same conversation in your head over and over again, wondering if you said the wrong thing? Maybe you sent a message to someone and then spent the next hour thinking, did that sound weird? Should I have worded it differently? Or maybe you're lying in bed at night, trying to sleep, but your mind keeps bringing up something that happened earlier in the day. If that sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone. Welcome back to English by Mind Training. I'm Sarah, and today we're talking about something that almost everyone experiences at some point in life: overthinking. Why do our minds get stuck in loops of analyzing, worrying, and replaying situations? Is overthinking just a bad habit, or is there actually psychology behind it? And to help us explore that question, I'm joined again by Alex, who always brings really interesting insights into how our minds work.
Hey Sarah, great to be back. And honestly, this is such an important topic because overthinking is something that affects millions of people. Sometimes people think they're the only ones dealing with it, but the truth is our brains are kind of wired to analyze situations.
That's actually really comforting to hear, because when you're stuck in an overthinking spiral, it can feel like your brain just won't stop. So, Alex, let's start with the basics. What exactly is overthinking?
Great question. Overthinking basically means thinking about something too much or for too long, especially in a way that causes stress or anxiety. Instead of thinking about a situation once and then moving on, the brain keeps replaying it again and again.
So it's kind of like the brain hitting the replay button repeatedly.
Exactly. And there are usually two main forms of overthinking. The first is rumination, which means thinking over and over about something that already happened in the past. The second is worry, which focuses more on things that might happen in the future.
That actually explains a lot, because sometimes people overthink things they said yesterday, and other times they're worrying about something that hasn't even happened yet.
Right. In both cases, the brain is trying to analyze the situation so deeply that it ends up creating more stress instead of solving the problem.
So the brain is basically trying to prevent mistakes or danger.
Exactly. When the brain senses uncertainty or risk, it starts analyzing every detail to figure out the best possible outcome. But in modern life, this survival system sometimes goes into overdrive. Instead of helping us solve problems, it keeps us stuck in endless thinking loops.
That makes a lot of sense. The brain is trying to help, but sometimes it kind of goes too far. Another thing people often connect with overthinking is anxiety. How are those two related?
They're very closely connected. When someone feels anxious, their brain becomes more alert to possible threats. Even small situations can feel much bigger in the mind. For example, someone might think, what if I said something embarrassing? And then the brain starts imagining all kinds of negative outcomes.
That explains why overthinking often happens late at night when people are alone with their thoughts.
Exactly. Without distractions, the brain has more time to focus on worries. And sometimes the mind starts building entire stories around small situations.
One thing that happens to a lot of people is replaying conversations. Thinking about something you said earlier and wondering if it sounded awkward. Why does that happen?
That's actually very common. Humans are social creatures, so we naturally care about how others perceive us. When we interact with people, our brain analyzes those interactions to understand how they went.
So the brain is basically trying to learn from social experiences.
Exactly. But when someone overthinks, that analysis goes too far. Instead of learning from the experience and moving on, the brain keeps replaying it again and again.
That explains why someone can spend hours thinking about a 5-minute conversation. Another thing I've noticed is that people who are perfectionists tend to overthink more. Is there a psychological connection there?
Definitely. Perfectionism often creates pressure to avoid mistakes. When someone believes everything they do must be perfect, their brain starts analyzing every decision more intensely.
So even small choices can feel like big decisions.
Exactly. And when perfectionists think they might have made a mistake, their mind keeps returning to it. They start asking questions like, could I have done that better? Did I say the wrong thing? That cycle can easily turn into overthinking.
Here's something interesting I've heard before. Some psychologists say highly intelligent people tend to overthink more. Is that true?
There is some truth to that. People who are naturally analytical often have very active minds. They enjoy thinking deeply about ideas, patterns, and possibilities.
Which is usually a good thing.
Absolutely. Analytical thinking is extremely valuable, but sometimes that same ability makes it harder for the brain to stop analyzing situations. Instead of accepting uncertainty, the mind keeps searching for answers.
So, the same brain power that helps people solve problems can also lead to overthinking.
Exactly. It's kind of a double-edged sword.
Another modern factor that probably affects overthinking is social media. Do you think platforms like Instagram or messaging apps make overthinking worse?
In many cases, yes. Social media creates situations where people have less information about what others are thinking. For example, someone might send a message and then see that the other person read it but didn't reply right away.
And then the overthinking begins.
Exactly. The brain starts creating different possibilities. Did they misunderstand my message? Did I say something wrong? But often, the real reason is something simple, like the person being busy.
That's actually really relatable. I think many listeners have probably experienced that exact situation. So, what happens if someone overthinks too often? Does it affect mental health?
Yes, it can. Constant overthinking can increase stress and make it harder for people to relax. It can also affect sleep because the mind stays active even when the body is trying to rest.
Which explains why people sometimes stay awake at night thinking about things that happened earlier in the day.
Exactly. Overthinking can also make small problems feel bigger than they actually are. When the brain keeps focusing on negative possibilities, it becomes harder to see situations clearly.
So, if someone notices they're overthinking a lot, what can they do about it?
One helpful strategy is learning to pause and observe your thoughts. Instead of getting caught in the thinking loop, try to step back and notice that your brain is analyzing something.
Kind of like watching your thoughts instead of getting pulled into them.
Exactly. Another helpful technique is focusing on actions instead of endless thinking. Ask yourself, is there something I can actually do about the situation? If the answer is yes, take action. If the answer is no, it might be time to let the thought go.
That's actually a really practical approach. So, when we look at everything we talked about today, it becomes clear that overthinking isn't just random. It's connected to the brain's natural desire to analyze, protect, and understand the world.
Exactly. The brain is trying to solve problems and avoid mistakes, but sometimes that system becomes too active.
And the key is learning how to recognize when thinking becomes too much thinking.
Right. Once people understand how their mind works, they can start developing healthier thinking patterns.
And that's a great place to wrap up today's conversation. If you enjoyed this discussion and want to explore more topics about psychology, communication, and human behavior, make sure to subscribe to English by Mind Training. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.